The next validation type is going to be that TryParse. Now, you're going to use TryParse when you are asking the user for a number, okay? It's going to be something that's going to be converted to a number. Now, remember, every time we use that read line, it's coming in as a string, no matter what. And we can't do math with a string, so we need to convert it. Now, before, we were just using parse. The problem with parse is if the user types in something wrong, it will create a runtime error and cause our whole program to crash. That is never good, right? So instead, we're going to use TryParse, which does two different things. The first thing it does is does a test. Can I parse or can I convert whatever the user is typing in into the correct data type? And if I can, then I will. Now, some good examples of this could be a product cost. It could be a tip amount. It could be the cost of a gallon of paint. It could be a dimension. It could be anything that the user has to type in that we're eventually going to do math with. So let's go through how to set up the while loop using this TryParse. Now, we still have to prompt the user for that initial variable. And remember, this is going to be a string. So I highly suggest when you're naming it, name it whatever variable you want to call it, and then put capital string after it. So start with that S using camel casing, right? So this example is cost, but when I bring it in from the user, it's cost string. Does that make sense? Then I'm going to set it equal to the console.readline because I'm bringing in a string variable. All right. Now, the next thing we need to do is create the data type that we actually want. So for this example, since it's a cost, I'm creating a decimal variable, and I'm just going to call it cost. So the string version, cost string. The decimal version is just going to be cost. Now, this is the variable that we're going to be using in order to catch the output of the TryParse, because there's a couple different things we need to do here. The next thing is we have to start up our while loop. Now, remember, we have to put that exclamation point in there because we need to flip it around because we only want to catch the bad results. So if it can be TryParsed, we want it to go through. If it can't be, it'll return false. But we want our while loop to go, so we have to flip it using that not operator, okay? So we have not, and then we have decimal, which is the data type we're going to. And again, if it was an integer you were trying to parse, you'd put int there. If it was a double, you'd put double. Right? So we'd have decimal dot, capital try, capital parse, open and closing parentheses, and inside of it, we're going to put the initial variable that we're going to try to convert, so cost string, the comma, the keyword of out, and the variable that is going to catch that converted value, and that's going to be the cost that we set up. Now, inside of our conditional block to run, we're going to do the same exact thing as we did before. So we're going to tell them the problem, we're going to restate the question, and then we're going to recapture their answer. And this is going to be our increment of change. Okay, so let's go ahead and see how this looks in actual code. Back in our validation while loops program, let's go ahead and try our TryParse. It's fun to say, try our TryParse. Okay, so remember, TryParse is going to be used when converting a string to any number. And do not use parse anymore. This is capitals because I'm yelling at you. Do not use parse anymore because remember that can create errors. Okay? So let's go ahead and ask the user a question. So ask the user for a number. Okay, so remember anytime we're talking to the user, that is going to be just a normal console.writeLine. So console.writeLine, open, closing, and a semicolon. Inside of here, a set of double quotes. And let's ask him for any random number. Please, actually, you know what? I'm going to start with a \r \n just because it's nice to start with a break. So please enter your favorite number. Okay, so now that we asked the user the question, we have to catch the results. So catch the user's response. All right. And remember for that, we do need a string variable. So for this, I'm just going to call it, let's call it favorite string. All right. So I'm going to set that equal to a console.readLine, open, closing, and a semicolon. Now we need to set up the variable, I'm going to put number variable so that it's not confusing, number variable to catch the converted value. Okay, so for this one, it can really be anything, right? So they can tell you any kind of number. So we should let it have decimal places, but it's not specific as currency. So for this, we can actually use a double. So that's the one I would use. Now I'm going to call this favorite, right? So the reason I'm doing this is because then I know I can use the favorite variable as my actual number instead of favorite string. So it tells me that it is a string. So that's why I'm setting it up like that. Okay. Now, we have set up our number that's going to catch the converted variable, which now it's time to create our validation. So we start that with a while loop, open closing parentheses, open closing curly braces, and split those apart. Now remember, inside of here, we have to start with that not symbol, and I'm just going to put an open and closing parentheses around it, just so nothing gets confused. And inside of it, we now have to put the TryParse test. Now, in order to do this, we have to use this data type. So I'm going to use a double for this example. So I'm saying double. And then a period. Capital try, capital parse, open closing parentheses. Now inside of here, we need two different things. The first thing is the variable to convert. And again, that's going to be that favorite string, a comma, the keyword of out, right? Notice it's blue, so it's that keyword. And then finally, the result variable. And that's going to be the one that's going to catch that converted value. So that's going to be our favorite. All right. Now, also remember that if it can convert it, it will, and it will store it inside of here. If it can't convert it, remember this will be 0. Okay, so make sure you keep that in mind. This might be 0 if it cannot convert it, right? We covered that in the other one, so I'm not going to go redo it. Now, 3 things we have to do. First thing is tell the user the problem. Tell the user the problem. Okay, so that's just a simple console.writeLine, open closing and a semicolon, set of double quotes. I'm going to start with that \r\n for that new line character. And I'm going to say, please only type in numbers, right? Because that's the problem, is they typed in something that couldn't be converted to a number. Then what I'm going to do is restate the question. So then that's just a console.writeLine again, open closing, semicolon, inside of here a set of double quotes, and I'm going to say, please type in your favorite number. Okay, and then finally the last thing, and this is going to be the same steps as we did for the isNull, right, is to catch the user's response using that same variable. So what variable is it? Is it the favorite or is it the favorite string? Remember, a console.readLine can only return a string, so we know it's the favorite string variable. So favorite string equals a console.readLine, open closing, and a semicolon. And that is it, right? So that is our whole while loop validation that will stop the user from typing in anything that is not a number, and specifically not a double. Now, after the while loop, I'm just going to tell the user what their favorite number is times 2. Okay, so just report back to the user. And the reason I'm doing this here is just to show the user that we have it, right? In your programs that you're doing, you don't always have to do this, so don't think about it. But I just want to show you that once we are past the while loop, it does do something. Okay, so I'm starting with a console.writeLine, text string inside of it, and I'm going to say, great, your favorite number is open closing curly braces with a 0, and times 2, it is open closing curly braces with a 1. Now after our text string, but still inside of that parentheses, I'm going to put a comma, and then I'm going to use the favorite variable, not the favorite string, right? Because from now on, I want to use the actual number. Then I'm going to put a comma, and now I'm going to do something that I usually tell students not to do, and this is just purely to show you that it works and is a number, but do not do this in your own programs, okay? I'm just going to do some simple math inside of a write line. So I'm just going to say favorite times 2. Now, the reason I wouldn't do this over here usually is I would want to create a variable and store that value, okay? But just because we're practicing, I'm going to leave it here, but do not do it in your own work. Let's go ahead and see this. So I'm going to start without debugging. Now again, it's going to ask me for my name, so my name is Dan. Welcome, Dan. It's going to ask me for enter a number. If I leave it blank, notice it says please only type in numbers. So I didn't use an is null or white space, so how is it catching blanks? Well, can I convert blank to a double? No. So then it comes as false. Remember, this will flip it to true, so then it will catch those as well. So I do not need to use the is null or white space for that. What about a cat? Well, you cannot convert a text string of cat to a double, so it comes back. How about spacebar, spacebar, spacebar? Nope, still not a number. How about 42? Yeah, great. Your favorite number is 42, and it times 2 is 84, right? So that worked, and it did convert it, and I showed that by doing some math with it, okay? But remember, don't do math inside of a right line. All right, so that is how a TryParse worked. Now, remember, if I only wanted integers, I would just use an int here, and then an int.tryparse. That's really the only difference between those.